Oh,
or
50 Shades.
yeah. So
thanks each of my guests for being here. We'll give some brief opening thoughts on the subject in general, and then we'll just kind of drill down to the specifics as we go. Introduce yourselves, and then we'll just get into it. We are going to start tonight with Lactoid.
Hi, thank you for having me, Wick. I am Lactoid. I'm a licensed attorney and political streamer. So if you're interested in legal political content, you can find me at Lactoid TV on YouTube and Twitch. As to the topic, Masculinity is defined by traits such as independence, dominance, maintaining control, and providing protection, to name a few, while femininity exudes traits such as compassion and submissiveness. I agree with the theory of compatibilism opposed to raw equity. Femininity complements masculinity in a giant cultural dance. Gender roles are inevitable, good, and informed by immutable biological characteristics. The reason why, in general, women will always be better suited for childcare is because women need to recover following a birth, men can't breastfeed, and due to testosterone's effect on the brain, men tend to be less suited to intimate, nurturing roles. This, and plenty of other examples, along with thousands of years of cultural construction, are obvious. However, there is a crisis of masculinity. On one hand, you have the current cultural zeitgeist, which defines the traditional man as bad, sexist, and adversarial. And on the other hand, you have snake oil salesmen peddling false masculinity defined by manipulating women and using them to hurt them, yourself, and everyone around you. Both are wrong. I advocate for an alternative, a true masculinity that rejects lizard-brained impulses, such as basing our value on what women think of us or sexual conquest, and instead developing a masculinity based on the higher order level values that have classically defined masculinity: independence, capability, and dedicated fatherhood.
Thank you. A little long-winded, but we'll get through it, buddy. Thanks for being here. Lactoid is great. He's one of the members of my community. We'll love to see it. Thanks for being here. Next up, Madam Genevieve, please.
Hi guys, I am Madam Genevieve. You can call me Genevieve or Jen if that's easier for y'all. I am a sex-positive feminist and sex worker, and I am a big advocate for equality, but I also don't deny that there are differences between men and women, of course. I still think that we can work towards a lot of the traditional feminist ideals of equality. And I think that there's a lot of value to outliers being able to explore a lifestyle and a expression beyond the traditional gender roles. I think that those work for a lot of people, but not everybody. So I think that we're moving in a positive direction in that regard.
Okay, thanks. Genevieve, love to have you. Love to see you. Thanks for being here. And we'll get into it in the open, I'm sure. Allie, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello. So, couple things. I'm a YouTuber. I am also a wife. I am about to be a mom for the first time ever. Active advocate of people moving to the Midwest because the cost of living is high, and I think everyone's missing out by not being in the wheat fields. So everyone should just, have a mass exodus and come out here. I promote trying to bring back the nuclear and the extended family, and I am here for modern women who have traditional values, or what that would look like, because everyone wants to be, traditional, but we're past the Industrial Revolution. So the definition of that is shifting, but those values and those ideals are still pretty useful. So that's what I do on my side of things over on YouTube.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for being willing to come on and discuss your point of view. We'll get into it as we go. Last but certainly not least, Destiny, please.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of people that are feeling lost and without purpose. I don't think that it is healthy to frame these conversations constantly as a crisis of masculinity, because I feel like it always sets us up in a male versus female paradigm. And I think that addressing all of the issues that men are facing as being oppositional or adversarial to women is destroying men's brains. I think that some of the people that are probably the least equipped to deal with the world are people that are pursuing red pill content. And I think that the second most, least able to pursue positivity in the world are probably people that massively consume red pill content. So I think that the idea that we need to continue harping on male masculinity, like that's going to fix things or make people better or do anything, I think is a red herring. And I think instead we should probably work on alleviating the broader issues that we feel in society that are improving everybody's lives, rather than setting up this weird male versus female paradigm for how to talk about issues.
Fair enough. And with that, feel free to get into it. If you have troubles getting in, please let me see your hands. Otherwise, start the show, and I'll be interjecting with questions to kind of clarify things and maybe drive discussion along if I feel we're getting off track, or frankly, if I'm bored. So, continue, please. Wonderful, not all at once. Oh, well, I guess I'll start with this, right then. So, we can all acknowledge, I think, that society is changing and how we view each other and how we view gender norms and how we view gender roles and things like that. There is, I know you don't like to refer to it as a crisis of masculinity, but there does seem to be something changing and going wrong, right? And so I guess I would ask, in regards to both men and women, right? Do they need today that they don't seem to be getting? What is lacking in either how we talk about it, how people interact in these spaces? What are we lacking? What are we missing?
I think we lack perspective on how we are all conservative and liberal to a degree. So we're all conservative about the things that we want to keep, and we're all liberal about the things that we want to change. And I think that we took a lot of ideas from academia that were theorized that wouldn't really play out well in reality when it came to intergender dynamics. And so when we removed some of these, what would be considered now more traditional gender roles, gender facets, we never considered why they were there in the first place. So
can you give me an example of one of those that you say we were removed?
Yes. So one thing that I think has been misconstrued is actually through anthropology. Margaret Mead, she was an anthropologist. She was one of the first female anthropologists to begin with. And so she broke some glass ceilings, also broke a lot of hearts along the way, both men and women's. So one of your first bi chicks of all time. But she went and observed other cultures and found that they had multiple genders. But she did observe a finite number of genders. So I guess my understanding is when she came back to American academia, she basically tried to say that gender was a social construct. And that, it made sense to a degree, right? There is masculine man in most cultures, masculine man, feminine woman, feminine man, and then masculine woman. But that doesn't mean that it's completely fluid. Like the non-binary thing, I think that was extrapolated from her notions. So we got rid of these, binaries that most of us probably fall into in one way, shape, or form. Or some people are still working to get rid of these things, and they might have had inherent value in the first place. They might not have even been bad. So my question is, why are we trying to get rid of or change something that might be beneficial, useful, romantic even?
Are we getting rid of that? Do we feel like that is being removed from society, gang?
Where are your strong red pill hates fucking feminist people? Where are they at on this panel, Wick?
You know what? I'll be the strong hates red pill feminist.
Now moderator has to play.
I'm not a feminist. I mean, I'm not.
You're the strongest feminist here, man. You do extreme, well, except for maybe Madam Genevieve. Well, yeah, you're an empowered woman online, being hyper masculine and hyper intellectual, arguing and debating people. You might be the highest testosterone in this whole room right now.
I don't see how that makes me feminist. I think that could be a consequence of capitalism and being past the Industrial Revolution. I don't think this has anything necessarily to do with Susan B. Anthony or Margaret Sanger. I just literally think that capitalism being done with the Industrial Revolution, that's enabled me to have this ability to be online. And also like Christian principles and values where women have been given, I guess, more autonomy than in some Eastern cultures.
Okay, Industrial Revolution is like 1700s though, right? Women haven't been working since 1820 in the same capacity as they are today, right? So I do think you bring up something interesting that, okay, fuck it. If no one else wants to be strong, I'll throw this out here, okay? And then you guys can tell this. This is what I feel like has happened to some extent in human society, okay? I feel like over the past 50 years, I think that men were socialized in a certain way to be masculine. Part of being masculine, part of the role that you fulfill in society was working a job and being productive. Women were socialized to be women, and part of your job was essentially to work as a cog in a man's life to where you took care of the household and empowered him to go and pursue work. That was generally the role of the woman. So you take care of the family, take care of the house. And this worked insofar as the family structure was concerned. I feel like something that's happened over the past 20 or 30 years is women have evolved significantly such that not only were they socialized with all the feminine aspects, they've also grown into these roles in terms of taking care of jobs. Like now they can work, and now they have reproductive freedom. So they've basically encapsulated both sides of the gender paradigm, and men are kind of left out here with only that masculine paradigm that's not enough to appeal to somebody in a relationship anymore. 50 years ago, a woman might say, well, what do you bring to the table? And I say, a paycheck. Now if a woman says, what do you bring to the table? It's like, a paycheck, I guess. And the woman's like, I don't need your paycheck, and I can fuck without having to worry about getting pregnant. So I don't even need you for sex because I've got birth control. I think that the problem right now is men have to figure out a way to offer something that women actually want, because dick in a relationship where you're going to get pregnant isn't a requirement anymore, and paychecks are something that women can earn.
I don't disagree with that at all. But the thing that men aren't bringing to the table is masculinity, though.
But I disagree.
Like,
Women have all the masculinity, right? They work jobs and they can provide for themselves. Having like
if you think that masculinity is solely tied down to income, I think that that's a really narrow view and understanding of masculinity. I think there's much more than that that a man could bring to the table, and like that is probably what most men are missing, that are second class in their relationships, if they're even in relationships at all. Certainly involuntarily celibate men, I think very few women would look at them in public. Some of the ones that we come across in the grocery store, and I don't think we would find them to be masculine at all.
Yeah, but
that's
the problem
what's
is
missing.
I think
and it's not all women.
But your brain there is going to be rating on a curve. I think that's the issue. And this is the thing, fundamentally, this is what I disagree with Red Pillars, is they say, okay, listen, I understand that men are masculine, but women are masculine now. Now you need to be hyper masculine. Women have evolved by embracing their masculinity as an opposite to their femininity, and men are supposed to evolve by being even more masculine. I think that can work for 1% of men, but like we're grading on a curve. Not every guy can be 6 feet tall. Not every guy can be shredded. Not every guy can be earning 6 figures massive income. By just pushing men to be, you got to be even more masculine than you already are to overcome the successful bridges that women have made to their masculinity. I don't know if that's possible for most men to do. I think you can hit like a 1 to 5% of men that could do it, but most of them are just gonna be like, well, fuck me. I'm fucked.
Well, I'm not trying to like dominate or anything like that, but I think that's insane, right? So what you're saying is probably what a lot of masculine women ask for. Well, I want a man to be my complement in life, but I'm not willing to soften up at all. And good luck finding a man like that. He has other options, right? So I don't think that men need to be more masculine for masculine women. I think that women need to embrace their feminine parts that they are often in denial about, and allow men to be masculine as well. I mean, that's the only way that it's going to work. It's a yin and a yang that works together. If you are just masculine as a woman, you're going to attract a feminine man, and then you're going to complain about him 10 to 15 years down the road.
I don't think women want to do that, though. If you're a woman and you're empowered,
that's your problem.
Well, but then the solution is just broken then, because women aren't going back to the kitchen. They're going to keep working, and women aren't getting off birth control. They're still going to want to have sex without being locked in a marriage. That's never changing. And to tell a woman that basically like, okay, listen, you're doing too well by embracing what were traditionally masculine things that we thought only men would ever do. You need to like stop doing those things and go back to being a woman that doesn't do those things. Realistically, that's just never going to happen.
You can be a woman who works 40 hours a week and be feminine. Like I'm very confused about your understanding of masculinity and femininity. Like it crosses all cultures, all religions, and all time.
Let's try to like narrow in on this. Like it looks like we have different views of what femininity and masculinity is. So maybe we can drill down on that a bit. And I just, again, open to the whole panel here. What is a masculine man to you? What are some characteristics of a masculine man, and what are some characteristics of a feminine woman? Ali, you mentioned that feminine women can still work 40 hours a week and be feminine, right? I guess, are there things you can do as a woman that are not feminine? I guess I would ask you specifically, and then to the rest of you, same question: masculinity, femininity. What is it to you? So go ahead.
So masculinity and femininity is within all of us. You'll find moments where you go in between yourselves as men. Maybe even lactoid. I'm sure you've had your softer moments in life. So masculinity is more of a penetrative, show of force out there in the world. So if you insert yourself in situations as a woman, or if you assert dominance as a woman, that would be a masculine trait, which isn't inherently bad. It depends on the context of the situation. You can do it with tact, but I would say that would be a masculine thing for a woman to perform.
I would agree with that. I also want to point out the fact that this is a question. I don't understand the problem with calling it a crisis of masculinity. I think it is, especially when we're having a difficult time understanding what it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be oppositional, adversarial. It can be compatibilistic. You can have a situation where, we're talking about, how do men discover themselves and how do men discover masculinity without having it be at the detriment of women, but more about how can we improve ourselves. And what makes a masculine man? What makes a good man? Well, I think there is one of the reasons for the crisis is you have some people. I would point to some people to perhaps to name drop like Andrew Tate or that irk of people who I think are sort of bastardizing the concept and using it to push things, a false masculinity of just like sexual conquest and getting laid and all that stuff, as opposed to what I think is a more important. Putting aside the lizard brain, something more important and like foundational, such as being independent, right? Understanding what your place is and discovering that. Now, how does that look? Well, I mean, I think part of it is at least having the goals of being successful in the workplace, taking care of yourself physically, learning to improve yourself through, becoming more charismatic, all these things that I think are critically important.
I just for you two, I want to push harder. Give us, what do we mean when we say masculine? Give us some examples. I want to know, because penetrative in the world is quite nebulous. What do we mean when we say masculine?
It's just being forceful, right? Like women are, femininity would be considered more submissive, more docile, right?
Can you give me, when you say
context?
Yeah, when you give a trait, give an example. What do you mean when you say forceful?
Okay, so let's say that I'm in the workplace, actually in prior service military, so I can talk about that, right? Okay, even though I was in the military, there were times where I was the best leader in the room, just among the enlisted folks, even though I was a woman and there were men in the room. But it was very obvious that I was more capable of the situation. So I would just go ahead and take charge because I'm trying to go home at 5 o'clock. I don't care about these other people. I'm gonna do what I need to do to get the mission done. And I would do that. And that was considered a masculine trait. And it's completely okay. It made sense for the context, but it did have some consequences romantically, I would argue. So does that help? Does that clarify?
Well, yeah, but I feel like you're giving me an example in my direction, though. In that, like, well, this was a case where... Oh. Well, because it feels like, so being assertive is a trait that men or women can be, but as women enter the... So when I tie it back to the job thing, so you say that just talking about the job isn't the only thing for masculinity. I feel like a lot of the other things that we talk about stem from the job. So when we talk about like assertiveness, there's a reason why a man is assertive in a household. It's because he's the one that has to suffer and grind to earn the money to support the household. So when we say like a man is a leader, of course a man is a fucking leader. If you want to ask for A, B, or C, and I'm the one earning the money, I'm going to have a huge say over that. I might have the final say over that because it's my body, it's my time that's going into it. But if a woman is working, that relationship is fundamentally altered, right? If a man was bossing you around in a military setting, a man came into a village or whatever the fuck, how we would imagine that, a military person, a civilian, then he would have that authority over you. But because you're in the military now working that job alongside the man, that authoritative, assertive position is threatened due to occupation, which I don't think is bad, by the way, but I'm the feminist here, so yeah.
Well, I think this is my confusion. I think this is an American perspective, that we think that because women work that they can't be feminine. It doesn't make sense because majority of wives are in fact working. So what their man doesn't get to be the man of the house because she's contributing to the household income, and typically he's out earning her anyway. I think that this is very much an overthought and also very reductive of masculinity. I can give other examples of masculinity too. Like my husband is more than a paycheck.
Sure.
And I hate to draw examples off of my relationship, but in my opinion, like my husband is, I would say like the most masculine man or one of the most masculine men I've ever met in my life. But there's other
give some examples about how.
Yeah. So he's trained in hand-to-hand combat. He did that for, I want to say, over a decade, and he's still familiar with it. You can see the way that he walks on his feet. And he's not tall either. He's 5'8". He's trained with weapons. He's constantly sharpening his skills with weapons. He goes to a men's shooting group, which is a very masculine space to be in. I do not like being invited. Other things that he does, I can ask his opinion, or I can ask him to make a decision, and he'll make it for me if I'm feeling uncomfortable with my interpretation of events. Like, those are masculine things. That's protection aside from provisioning. He does the provisioning as well. And also, just repairing things around the house, which, women can do that too. But I just find that for some reason we rely on our men to do that more.
Can I ask, just if I may interject here?
Because I want to bully her.
Oh, you can bully her in a second.
Okay.
But are men a failure? Is a man a failure when he fails to be masculine in these cases? When in your military group, for example, when none of the men took charge, right? Have they failed as men?
Yeah. Yes. It was so bad. Because I guess the civilians, like, you guys think that the military is this great, awesome place. All you need to do to get in is not be obese and not go to jail and have a GED. So this crisis of masculinity is also an issue within the United States military, to the effect that it even affects leadership of officers that are complacent and will push whatever agenda gets shoved down their throats by a general instead of standing up for their lower enlisted or like their lower officers and taking a stand. It's a bunch of yes men. It's a huge issue. Yes, they failed as men. If I have to do a man's job, yes, you failed as the man.
Okay. Madam Genevieve, real quick. I want to get you in here. Do you think if your man, right, if someone, your partner or whatever, fails to be assertive, have they failed as men? Would you agree with this take, or what do you think, Madam Genevieve? I want to give you some space here.
I think that obviously we generally have the association that it's masculine to provide protection, right? Or to protect. That's generally hand in hand with being a provider. Like, I think those are probably the two most common things that we look to in a traditional male. And I guess for me, it really does depend on the circumstance. I think that...
Well, using that circumstance, right? Using that example that Allie gave, right? If in a workplace, right? Workplace setting, no one's taking charge, none of the men step up, have they failed as men? Would you agree with that or disagree?
I would disagree. I think in a workplace, having worked in corporate America, I don't look and wait for the man to take charge and be the leader. In fact, that was a role that I took on myself a lot, and I don't know. I guess I don't look at that necessarily as it doesn't have to continue to be a masculine trait in the workplace. I would think that as a failure.
Okay.
I think that because it was the military, it's different. Like, this wasn't like one time or a handful of times that I had to take charge of a situation in the military. It was often. There were even times where I was physically stronger than some of the men in the room. Like, it's absolutely embarrassing. You know, but there were good male leaders. Do not get me wrong. I'm just saying it happened too many times for me to think that there is an issue. That you have to be comfortable asserting authority as a man in this world. It doesn't make any sense for me. Like, we need y'all to be leaders as well.
Especially in a family context. I think that's important here because of the biological element to that.
I feel like, so when we go back to, so I asked you the traits for masculine things, okay? So here's a couple of things that I have to say about this. So one is, I think the protection thing is a cope. I think that when we talk to women and we find out, like, why do you like men? If you're trying to make a value proposition, you're trying to make an offer to a woman, and as a man, you're like, well, I can protect you. Like, I don't think it's a very valuable thing where it's like, okay, like, I'm a woman, I'm navigating, like, the dangerous streets of DC on the daily basis, and I need a man to protect me. Like, I think that's kind of like a nice fluffy thing on the side that maybe you can feel a little bit safer, but I don't think that, like, just being a protector is going to be like, I'm very strong and now I should be able to go out and get a wife. I don't think that's ever going to happen traditionally.
I think that those are maybe used to be valued.
Yeah, maybe they used to be valued, but like in today's society, like I don't think that like selling protection like you're a bodyguard is a thing. Also, a second thing, I would even say personally, I'm gonna personally attack you, but I want to bring this up personally because you brought up your personal life. I don't know if you necessarily value those things in terms of like being like a personal important buy-in to you because your husband is so much older than you. Isn't he going to fall out of physical capability of providing this protection if he ages out of being able to do hand-to-hand combat or weapons training and everything? Like, isn't that something that at some point you might actually be the one in that situation? I'm guessing you were in the military, you could probably handle a gun. You probably know a fair bit yourself, right?
Well, okay, so here's the thing, right? He is older. Now, he's still very strong. I think that also we don't see a group of men that are from age 50 to 70 that are physically fit, that have been working out for decades. They totally exist and they're capable. The only issue that I could really think would be eyesight. Even strength-wise, you're able to retain testosterone. We have a very specific dietary, guideline that we follow in our house, so testosterone's fine. But like, he can still be sharp. As long as he can see, he can still fire a weapon. He trains with men that are much older than him. Often. However, like, will there be a time where he can't protect me? Yeah, probably. Hopefully I'll be blessed with a son who would also look to protect me. And I'm not kidding. Like, this is what life is for. This is what men
you really
are for.
You really think about this like, I need a son to protect me in the world. Like, is this actually like a day-to-day?
Look
Where do you live? What
Midwest?
Midwest? Oh, come on. Your son's not going to protect you from a scam on the phone from some Indian guy locking your OS down and saying, I need $50 or I'm going, like, come on. This is not really what your sons are for, right?
That's real. That happens to old ladies all the time.
It happens to old men too, though, no?
Yeah, well, I mean, I might only have daughters, okay? But aside from that, I would think that my husband has the foresight to be like, look, honey, I can't really protect you like I used to. We need to get you going to the range. And he's going to take me. Like, this is all planning here. If he gets hit by a bus tomorrow, like, okay, I'm SOL. But, I don't think that this is like a cope about men being protective of women because it's about what makes you wet, right? And like, will we go for a safe man who can't defend his family physically or with weapons? Yeah, probably for security reasons. Am I going to be able to be faithful to him 10 to 15 years down the road? road? I don't think so. I think that's a really big ask.
I guess when I think of the traits that you listed, there was, broadly speaking, there was the protection thing, which is, I feel like that can't be a major draw. Just from what I've seen of you, I feel like there's probably got to be something more there. And then the second thing you listed, I thought was really interesting. You said you could solicit advice or feedback if you've got like an issue, like making decisions. Like, I would argue that's a feminine trait. Being able to listen to somebody, being able to be emotionally or intellectually responsive to somebody's needs, and then giving feedback based on what they're saying. I think that largely speaking, that's considered like a more feminine thing. Like a woman asking her husband advice on some particular thing, I don't think would be a traditionally masculine thing in most men's eyes. Not to say that it's good or bad. Well, I would consider that good, but.
Well, I want to give other people time.
Sure.
Yeah, so I understand we're not like living in caveman times where dinosaurs are not, whatever the fuck's chasing after us. But you agree that there are dangers like in society, right? And there is like a physical difference here. And so those physical differences sort of inform the reason why men have the roles of being the protector. And doesn't that make sense, right?
I don't
like,
acknowledge that. No, I don't acknowledge that.
We
No,
have
you don't think like at the
bunch
bar
of
some
modern-
guy is being aggressive and like.
I think the vast majority of women are not going to be in scenarios where they need like a man to protect them, unless they're like going on and starting fights. I don't think that that's a normal thing for most people. No, I don't think so.
I just disagree then. I think that does come up, and I think when it comes up, you should be ready, not only to protect a woman, but also your children, right? I mean, that's an element here as well, because children are vulnerable, they can't defend themselves, and being able to have that sort of protection mindset and the physical capability of doing so, that to me seems like a perfectly fine principle to follow and something that is good to encourage in men. And when we don't, we get problems, right?
If
I mean,
men
every
don't,
couple that was attacked, I'm sure didn't think they were going to be attacked. Like, you're not planning for what is most likely to occur. You're planning for the exception to the rule, that one bad night.
You're not planning your entire life's future relationship and your family and everything around a potential exception.
It's one part. It's
The
one
men
part.
that you know, like the men that I know, like I know an atheist anarchist who is fully prepared to physically protect his family and also do that with weapons.
That's fine,
Like,
but I'm just saying that, like,
to your community.
you said you lived in the Midwest. I lived in Omaha, Nebraska, and Council Bluffs for my entire life. I don't know where all these people that are getting. Maybe there's really, really rough neighborhoods where some of you guys are just like walking. Chicago, by and large, is a peaceful place to be. There are some parts that are dangerous. Same thing with Detroit. I spent a lot of time in Chicago, a lot of time in Detroit. Most of the city is fine, right? There are parts that are sketchy. Same thing with LA. Like, most of the city's fine. There might be some spooky homeless people in some areas, but it's not like Chicago's like, I gotta call a friend because we only travel in groups of 7 or more when we walk to work or something, right? I don't think it's that fucking crazy. But maybe that's just my perspective, right?
The average modern person has a lot of tools at their disposal that they can use to minimize risk of danger in their life. And so having this burly security guard follow you around and making that like your primary objective in finding a partner just is obviously, it's irrelevant.
It doesn't have to be primary. It could be one element, right?
It could be one element.
Could be one element.
I do agree. I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that a dude that's shredded that could kick like 3 people's ass, that's gonna be an attractive guy physically, and there's gonna be like, I don't disagree with that. But whenever I push on like what are the masculine traits men need to work on, one, we're talking about a guy that's like a top 1%er there that can like take on like multiple adversaries. So it's not realistic for most men to aspire to. And 2, it's like the first thing that everybody gives. And when I hear this, I'm like, holy fuck, are we like in Mosul right now? Is there like fucking ISIS around the corner where you're planning your relationship and shit? Where 99% of the time, oh fuck, there's a really good rule for buying shit in your life, and it's like the 10-99 rule or something. Like, I don't remember what it's called, but it's like, you spend like 99% of your money on the things that you spend like 99% of your time on, right? So you get a good bed, a good chair, whatever. The idea that we're planning our relationships around like these exceptional one-off circumstances, like how do you feel about your husband? Like, he's a really shitty communicator, he's really abusive to me and everything, but man, if we ever get into a fight, he's gonna fuck somebody up. Like, I've never heard anybody say that my entire life before.
Well, because it's a caricature. That's why you haven't heard it. It doesn't make any sense. Just because a man is dangerous doesn't mean that he's inherently malicious. It's just that he's capable of ending somebody's life who's trying to harm not just his woman, but his children. I wrote an entire article about this, and there's women that agreed that these traits are attractive as well. I think that women who want masculine men, I think some women are not able to compete for a masculine man or are not feminine enough for him. You know what I mean? Because it requires a dynamic in the household. How is he supposed to lead if you're constantly dominating him? So for those women, for masculine women or women who are just just not in touch with the dating market, yeah, they might end up with some feminine men that they're going to complain about until the end of time, and that's okay. That's not typically what I advocate for, but it's going to happen to majority of folks. Like, not everybody's going to get someone that they're attracted to in the long term.
What do you think the most masculine men are doing in society? The most masculine men in society are making single moms, and they're in jail.
Okay, you're talking about
that's
the
their
very
new false
extremes.
masculinity.
No, that's the
Yeah,
traditional honor culture, Matt. That's as traditional as it gets.
No, no,
is
no, I-
violence
I-
on the
single-
street.
Single motherhood is traditional.
It is the most traditional form of hypermasculinity. Is fucking women without a care in the world and then getting into violent altercations and ending up in jail. Of course, these are the
You're
most
talking about
masculine
dark
men.
triad.
Sure, but I'm
I
saying
don't-
that is like the most hypermasculine. Like
So
when all
this
you're
is-
giving me is like protection and ability to fight. Yeah, that's of course what most people are thinking of, right?
I also am
this is-
questioning. Hold on, I do have a question for Allie as well. You're advocating for, increased femininity in these relationships. You're anti-feminism, and yet it feels to kind of fly in the face of that belief that you did spend time in the military. How does that? Because that is a very masculine direction to go in. How is that? How do you square those two ideas?
So you're right. It was a masculine thing to do. Is a masculine thing to do. It did masculinize me, and I had to kind of deprogram a lot of these things. But we're also dealing with propaganda. When the United States Army told me that I was strong enough, as strong as a man, and that I could carry a man 6 foot with weapons and armor on his body off of the battlefield, I believed them. This is inherently false. I am 5'4". I was 127 pounds when I joined. I thought that I was signing up for a job that I could do. That turned out to be a lie, and I'm permanently disabled in some ways. I'm functional, but it did change my body for the rest of my life, and I'm not the only woman. There's a lot of women that have the same injuries that I do. I have no problem saying this publicly. I have labral tears in my hips. That's from my time in service. I'm grateful that I did it. It got me financial stability early in my 20s for the rest of my life, but it came at a huge cost. And that was just propaganda. Like, I truly thought that I was able to do my job.
So
Today, do you think women have a place in the military or no?
Yeah, but they changed. So here's the thing: they tried to do that, right? They tried to kind of equalize it based on sex because that's an objective reality that we can't deny. They did the Army Combat Fitness Test, but women were failing it. Like, not that you can fail it, but they just weren't qualifying very well for the positions that they wanted. So they even had to adjust that. Even when I was in, there were physical differences for the APFT, the Army Physical Fitness Test. So that were, they had things that were different between men and women there as well. Can you repeat your question one last time?
If you believe that women have a place in the military today, like after your experience and everything.
Right. Yeah.
Is that not a feminist ideal though, or a feminist perspective?
Right. So I think that we should just do the jobs that we're physically qualified for, period. But like, they cannot have these false standards where they're just sending people through these schools, because that's what happened to me, and that's what happened to other women that were in my class to be a combat medic specialist. They just gave them the checks. That's not okay. You have to be able to physically perform the task. And there's a minority of women who can, but most women can't. That's not to say that they can't be human resources. I think that that's absolutely fine to be a desk jockey, and you're still serving your nation. We used to have a women's Army Corps, but we did the co-ed thing, and the co-ed thing has other consequences too, like sexual harassment, and also, not to say that the military is like eat pari, but that's YouTube speak for the R word. But when these things do happen, it's not handled well internally. So there's consequences from this co-ed nature. But I don't think that women can't serve. I just think they need to be serving differently in different jobs they're physically qualified for.
And that highlights kind of the aim here, which is, I think, goal of equity. They are lowering the standards for women because the reality is the women that can make it are the exceptions. And we just have to approach society with an understanding, right? In the same way that in relationships, right? And the ability to be a protector and physical size, those things, like, are there women that can protect themselves? You probably could, right? But those are exceptions. And also there's a perception of danger as well. So I can't tell you how many women I know who don't feel comfortable walking alone at night, right? But they feel perfectly fine when I'm walking with them. That in of itself is like a limiting factor when they're concerned about the risk and the harm that can come to them. But that being able to be a protector alleviates that perception and really provides a level of freedom of, I can walk being comfortable now. I think that's an important part of this.
I'm so curious where you guys are from, because I've known so many women in so many different areas. I remember one of the first times I was in fucking Seattle hanging out with a girl. I got fucking petrified because some crazy fucking 300-pound homeless dude behind us started fucking screaming. I was like, is this normal? And she was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of homeless people that are just screaming. I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. I know so many women in so many cities like this that have no problem walking like to and from work, that like obviously don't go to sketchy sections, but some of them ride the bus, some of them ride the train, some of them just don't give a fuck. where are these like ultra violent areas in the US where women are like, I can't even go outside, I'm worried that I'm gonna get like abused or raped or whatever. Like, I feel like this is only happening in the context of like going to sketchy parties or bars where you're getting hit on. If you like go literally like to a bar or something alone as a woman, it could get spooky. But I feel like most women are like not dumb enough to do that. But
So there's like the practical application, and then there's the romantic application. Women trend higher in neuroses like anxiety and depression in comparison to men. Right? We might not say these things out loud, but I mean, y'all, you have a wife, okay? Don't front. So it's not just about that fact that my man is physically capable, and that's a big deal if I'm going to choose a man and I'm going to have his children. But it's also that I can breathe. I don't have to have that high level of anxiety and be on alert because my husband is on alert for me, in a sense. Like, I'll try to be practical, but that's the other thing that it's for. You know, it's not like you're going to go outside and always get your ass whooped. Like, the statistics don't support that. I think we know that.
sure, but I'm curious if there's got to be some other thing, because my guess is there's probably the majority of men, like 98%, are stronger than the majority of women, but that's not enough to get a woman to date you, right? And then even in the case where you could select for, and again, if you guys want to give more masculine traits, I'm just working on what's been given so far, even in a case where you could select for the most masculine man, you could find guys that are way more shredded or way more physically capable in their 20s or early 30s that are capable of protecting you. But I think, and I don't know this, but I think you selected your husband for traits that were more important than just this, like, being a protector part. I bet there's other reasons why you're married to him, and it's not just because you found like the first 49-year-old guy that could protect you. Like, the fact that he's so old probably means he's developed so many other traits that I bet you're attracted to as well, I guess.
Well, let's dig into that real quick. Let's dig into that, right? Like, so we mentioned like protection, assertiveness, to penetrate the world, as we say. What are some other masculine traits? Maybe more on the mental side, like some things I hear are stoicism, reliability. Yeah, that's what I can think of on my head. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I want to talk about stoicism, but somebody else go first.
Yeah, I think stoicism is good. I also think being able to provide is good. I think a lot of this kind of comes back to, ultimately the common root here is being able to control a bad situation, or being able to make a good situation even better. So, like, not only in the situation of protecting somebody, but also, being able to provide for somebody who maybe has to take off work to go give birth, and staying home and breastfeeding their child. Like, being able to be in the position to take care of that person is another masculine trait that I think is beneficial for that very reason. Because if you're not able to do that, well, now the child is at a disadvantage.
Again, I think we got to get it, because you're saying jobs again. It's got to be something more than jobs, because women can work. It has to be something more than that. Yeah.
You're right. No, like, you're right. Like, you have to be a man if you're gonna have a feminine woman in your life who's comfortable with like building a legacy and a life with you. Like, you keep asking, like, what's missing? Like, manhood is what's missing. But
yeah, but I'm trying to figure out what that is. Even when you say like stoicism,
okay,
like being
stoicism. I got you.
Okay,
right?
get me. Yeah.
Every woman wants to be like, oh, we're egalitarian. We can handle the hard stuff. Right. When I see a man crying, I am immediately instilled with fear, because ish has hit the fan. You can argue an evolutionary perspective on that, but I'll give you a better example. You're a woman on a flight. There's turbulence, but you don't really care. The stewardesses are moving through, the men are quiet. Now there's turbulence and the men start screaming. Would you not just like urinate on yourself right then and there? Like, as a society, I think we rely on men for emotional stability. I think that we really do. And I've had men come out and talk about this as well. And a lot of these things are going to be anecdotal, but there's some studies we can talk about another time. But I've had men come out and say that they had to be strong for a period of time when there's a death and things like that. There's going to be moments in time where a woman is called to be stoic, and I would argue as well, Marcus Aurelius was taught stoicism by his wife. So it can work for both genders, but it is an attractive thing in a man, just because of, on average, and that's a fact, women trend higher in neuroses. We look to you guys to be the calm to the storm. And again, with these feminine men, they're out here, we've talked about DJ Ack, but anyway, like, these guys that just go off hyper emotional, like, that's not masculine, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, and they failed as men too.
I would agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah.
But I also,
context, right?
I push back a little bit on, like, because when we talk about like hyper emotionality as the opposite of stoicism, I don't think anybody likes hyper emotional people. Like, I don't like, even hyper emotional women are probably not good. I agree with to some extent with what I don't like calling this stoicism. I think like having good emotional stability and being able to remain calm and being able to remain in control in complicated or confusing situations, I agree that that's an important trait for a person to have. It shows a level of like emotional maturity to be able to do that. I don't know if men are the ones that are traditionally excelling in that, given how many of them are prone to violent crime.
Mm-hmm. Like, would it help if you just separated masculinity and femininity, like, from the person and made it more spiritual? Because these concepts exist across all cultures, all religions, in all time. And I know we like to think that we're these social constructivists, but there is something to be said that there's a wisdom there that these things have emerged in all these different parts of the world throughout human history, or recorded human history. So you can argue it from a spiritual context. It doesn't need to be just distilled down to the sexes. It's just that if you're going to have polarity in a relationship, hopefully long term, because that's what I kind of hope for, if you're gonna have polarity, like, you might want to be more on the masculine side of things as a man, and as a woman you might want to be more on the feminine side of things, and just to have that yin and that yang. That
I agree. Yeah, I agree that things have emerged through all of human history in these ways. These gender roles are. I'm not going to disagree. That's obviously true, but I think there are two things that uniquely challenge that today, and that's birth control and education, such work. I think that these things have fundamentally altered a woman's relationship with sex and fundamentally altered her engagement with the world. And now we're seeing that maybe some of those old roles that emerged aren't really as intrinsic to our sex as we thought they were. Maybe they were intrinsic to our roles in society that kind of followed our sex. But now that women have the ability to fuck without consequence and work a job, it might be that we have to engage with these concepts in a slightly different manner. We can't just assume that all women want to be like submissive and subservient. That might have just been secondary to them not having jobs.
Other than
you think they're somewhat intrinsic? Like you said it's not super intrinsic or not as intrinsic as we thought, but I mean, do you think that biological realities to some extent are always going to inform some level of...
Probably going to be some differences for sure. If for no other reason, there's going to be in terms of like average strength and like our aptitude.
Right, but that average strength, for example, right? Like it almost seems to me that we're kind of pushing it beyond what the equilibrium is, right? And then like Allie was talking about in the military, they're literally lowering the standards for women to get more women in the military when that's not where the equilibrium truly is.
Yeah, that's
in the
stupid.
name of feminism.
I think everybody here agrees that the changing of those standards for how they would grade you on your Army fitness test, the Army personal fitness test, the changing of those standards is fucking stupid. You either can climb into a plane with a rucksack on or not, or a helicopter. Like you either can or you can't. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. Like the grading should be objective for that, right?
Right, and that's one example of like society pushing. I mean, I can think of it as we keep talking, but that was the one that came to mind because of what Allie taled about, right? Like this idea of feminism is pushing beyond what the equilibrium is. And in fact, the equilibrium might be the differences that do exist and should be expressed through gender roles might be greater in certain circumstances than they currently are.
What I mean by other, just to kind of, when I ask for other examples, like other examples of how femininity or feminism has changed, like the standards that we use and apply, that we have pushed the bar away from the equilibrium that Blacktoid here is talking about, in the name of equity or equality. Can you give me some more examples other than the military? Anything else?
Yeah, so, I mean, but this is going to be, we're going to have to take a little bit of a walk for this one. But leaving women vulnerable to where they are going to be more at risk of elder abuse because they bought into, like, this feminist boss babe, independent, single and childless narrative.
If I'm a feminist boss babe, wouldn't I have enough money to hire for end-of-life care and pay for, like, a nurse to come in and take care of me because I've been working for decades and investing in my retirement?
Yeah, and that's awesome, and what I recommend to childless women who want to be single and all these other things. And that sounds great until you have Alzheimer's or dementia, and you're going to need people that love you, that you enrich their lives, and they're going to be looking out for you to make sure that you're not being abused. You want your kids or your husband or your nieces and nephews, doesn't matter which one, you just need to invest that time. You want them to be up the behind of whatever nursing home you end up in. We take our cognition for
absolutely.
granted.
It's important to have family members looking after older people, but it doesn't always necessarily have to be the children. Like there are definitely other options available too.
Yeah, like nieces and nephews. On my husband's side of the family, they have a matriarch. She's an aunt, but you would never guess that she wasn't a grandmother. I thought that she was, but she had just invested so much time in her nieces and nephews. They all take very good care of her. But like what I'm saying when it comes to like how that can be a drawback for feminism, because we're talking about liberating women, that's putting women at risk for abuse, right? And it's like you have a fertile window that takes a sharp hit at 35. And if we're going to be living, right now we're living to 71.1. I anticipate that'll increase. And I think that will, if I had to choose, I think we'll probably be living to 90. So if you as a woman choose to be single and or childless, the repercussions of that are going to be 55 years of the rest of your life to 90.
I think, something real quick, because I think this is actually a counterintuitive thing. I think if you want to increase your chances of being safe as a woman, I think that you have to remain single. Because I think that the highest likelihood that a woman ever encounters violence in her lifetime is interpersonal violence in a domestic abuse situation. That's so the best thing you can do is keep a man out of your house. Like, the chance of a guy breaking into your house and violent robbery or whatever, or burglary or stuff like that is pretty low. But I'm pretty sure a decent number, I'd have to Google it, I was 30 to 40% of women have experienced some form of intimate partner violence in the household. And it's
So you're talking about DV, but I'm talking about how other ways that feminism can be harmful. I'm saying that there's probably going to be a wave of women that are single and or childless that are at risk for being abused in nursing homes that we haven't seen before. Women are also right now, if you neglect the trans stats, in comparison to men, they're the largest growing demographic of homeless individuals. And I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I'm sorry, I have pregnancy brain right now. I'm trying to remember your name.
Genevieve?
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure,
Genevieve,
sorry,
yeah.
please.
So I get what you're saying about make the money. Okay, but for some reason, there are, I don't know how much money you're making or anything like that, but women making enough money to retire, that's the minority of women. That's also the minority of people. You know what I mean? So as much as women should be doing this thing, if you're going to be single and childless, you need to put your big girl panties on and you need to go and you need to make that bread. But they're not going to. That's the problem.
Well, I think that's a problem for men as well. I think a lot of people are struggling to have enough of a retirement fund to live comfortably in their old age. And I think that kind of brings us back full circle to something that was brought up in the beginning of the conversation by Stephen, that we have a lot of issues that are affecting both men and women, and this hyperfixation on making it a men versus women kind of a conversation all the time.
Yeah, old
isn't
person
really doing us any favors.
end of life care, to make that a gendered issue would be crazy to me. Because if anything, I would expect, technically, women are always probably going to suffer end of life care, even in a perfect world, because women tend to outlive men anyway, right? Women tend to outlive men, and they tend to marry up in age 4 to 5 years too. So you're always setting yourself up to be, yeah.
I guess there's also a stereotype. There's a stereotype that these single childless women also are just living in these cliques of other single childless women. So in that regard, they'd be much better off than a single friendless man, because they'd at least have other found family that they would be able to gain support from too. They're less lonely.
I want to. Right.
Go ahead.
So I want to back to elder abuse. This is I mean I have the information pulled up on the other side, but it's common consensus. I would say even maybe for the CDC that women are more at risk of elder abuse than males. And I'm not saying that maybe the men aren't being reported or maybe they're not living as long, but women dominate the workforce when it comes to CNAs, and they are low-educated, low-paid women. I have family members that have been CNAs, went to college with women who are CNAs. It's not the highest professional status job out there, right? So that's already an issue. It's low education and then low compensation. Aside from that, when they have to choose, let's say that you just happen to be this sociopathic, malicious CNA, are you going to try to beat down a man or a woman? You're probably going to choose a woman. They're smaller because
An old person? They're both equally beatable, downable.
I'm actually so curious. If you were to do a fight between 70-year-old men and women, yeah,
I can get there if you let me get there, right? No, older men being strong is true. You can talk to CNAs. They have had fists thrown at them by not mentally cognizant men, and they land hard. Eventually, yeah, they do get weak, but in comparison to women, there are still sex differences in old age, that old man strength that we joke about. It's actually true and real. Y'all probably got neighbors out there that are trimming their yard that are 90 years old, but that's not the point. Women are also at risk more so for osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, and dementia. That's what makes them more vulnerable, aside from the sex differences. Those three things, that's going to leave them to be victimized, in my opinion, by low-educated, low-compensated other women. That's the danger if you don't set up your life accordingly. If you do, amazing, awesome. Do I think that feminism promotes that? I don't. I don't think women get practical advice from feminists.
Okay, I think this is a good segue to ask about a tweet you recently made, if you don't mind, Alan. So recently, because you talked about the importance of having children and things like that, I think you discussed that on your channel. But recently you tweeted something that I have questions on. And I'm going to read it verbatim here. Surrogacy is evil. Rich women and men rent a poor woman's womb and deprive a baby of the only mother it knew. Do you care to elaborate on what you mean by that exactly?
Yo, I meant what I wrote. What you mean?
Damn.
I meant what I wrote. Oh,
I was
That's what I
excited for
mean.
this turn of conversation here. If we can make it a bit personal, just for a moment.
Yes.
I don't have children currently, but I do want biological children at some point. I'm also an endocrine cancer survivor, and that complicates my medical history so that I'm not able to carry a pregnancy to full term. What would you suggest someone in my situation do who wants biological children but doesn't want to be evil according to your standard here?
Don't pull any punches. Go hard. Make her
I don't-
cry.
Like, you know, infertility is a common human issue. You know, like it is what it is. Like you can't. This is what we want to plan for everything. We want to make sure that we can get everything that we want. It's like sometimes you don't always get what you want. You know, if you want biological children, there's ways that you can go about it. But then we have to go into the ethics of IVF. Like I still think and maintain that surrogacy is evil. There are things that you can't plan for. You cannot plan for endocrine cancer that you survived, right? So it just is that you're not going to be able to biologically carry children. So how can we live and operate aside from that? We can go for adoption. That's one thing we can do. I think that, you know, if America was
Adoption
saying,
is great, and that's definitely something that I do want to consider as well. But I can't deny that I want at least one biological child or more. And then I do plan on fostering and all of that as well. But are you saying, like, in your worldview, I'm just kind of shit out of luck on the, like, I got dealt a bad hand, sorry.
She's always
you
gonna
had
be
cancer,
evil.
You had to go through treatment, but you're
Yes.
either evil or you don't get to have kids that are yours biologically.
yeah, and that doesn't.
Would
have
it
to
also be evil if one of my sisters were my surrogate?
That I don't think so. I think the problem is like the changing of money in hands for labor. Like that's odd.
I would pay them if my sister was my surrogate. I would still pay her.
Wait, just real
I
quick,
think
then
that
why are
that's
you okay with
weird.
adoption? If that's your problem, why are you okay with adoption? You know the money changes hands in that situation. Shoot.
The kid's already born, though. It's fundamentally, you're not renting womb space.
Yeah, and this is usually like upper class women that are renting poor women's wombs. Like this is modern day slavery that somehow is, you know, allowed and continues the commodification of the female body. It doesn't mean that I don't have like empathy for women who are infertile, but you know, why do we have to be like, oh well, you can't have kids, so like let's just rent somebody else to have kids for you? Like sometimes you just take L's in life. I had a miscarriage. There wasn't anything that I could do about that. That is life, and that's okay.
We
can
have
still
the
live despite
medical
that.
abilities to intervene in things. I mean, you could use the same argument that I shouldn't have pursued any oncology treatment in that case. Like, it's kind of
That's
ridiculous
life,
to
it's
assume
cancer.
that just because I'm privileged and I have access to medical things that other people don't have access to, that I shouldn't take advantage of them or I shouldn't pursue them.
But you just said it
I'm
yourself,
not
you take
denying
advantage
that
of
I'm privileged. There is absolutely a privilege there. 100%.
Yeah, it's an incredible privilege. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And I mean, I suppose, I don't know if this was an option to anyone who has endocrine cancer, but to have like eggs harvested, you know, beforehand, before you get chemo treatment. Like, I don't know what that looks like, but we're just continuing to cheapen the sanctity of life.
Wait,
And that
hold
has-
on. How
If
does
I
it
had had my-
cheapen? How does it cheapen the sanctity of life? If somebody has like
Are you
IVF,
kidding me? Like, let me
If I had
paint
had
the
my
picture for you.
eggs
Let
frozen,
me-
I would still need a gestational carrier to carry the pregnancy. The issue isn't my eggs; it's the actual being able to carry full term.
Yeah,
and also, I want to hear.
can't-
I want to hear the
fix
sanctity of
that,
full
you
life.
know?
How is that?
The sanctity of life, like it's a really cheap thing that we have women who, it's not simply because they have like a genetic or a fertility issue or an environmental problem. There are women who simply encountered senescence, old age as a human, and because they didn't plan accordingly, they simply are going to pay another woman to carry a life. That is the only mother that baby knows, and we're just going to completely rip it from them. And that's for the women that are getting surrogacy. That's not even to talk about the gay male couples that are doing surrogates, or I mean same-sex female couples too that are doing surrogates. Like, it depends on what you believe, and I believe that children have a fundamental right to a mother and a father. And I
Okay,
don't
wait,
think
hold on,
that
wait. That second part is irrelevant. Okay, hold on, because you can have a mother and a father that are adopted too, right? I just don't understand how if somebody chooses to do the surrogacy thing, I don't see where the cheapening of life comes from, because they've given up essentially the child they've had like to a prearranged adoption. Is that like whose life is being cheapened there?
the child and the woman. That takes an emotional toll. Are you like, where are the rich women that are out here being surrogates?
They're not doing it. Where are the rich women that
are
are out there working McDonald's? That takes an emotional toll too, right? Obviously, if you're being compensated for something like that, I never said it was the same thing. But of course, there's going to be some emotional toll. But that's what you're being compensated for, is the emotional toll, right?
Oh, I mean, okay, yeah, we're just gonna pay women for the emotional toll having a child ripped from their arms.
We pay for emotional labor all the time.
Yeah, emotional labor is literally like, damn, when you look at like nursing and like, or veterinarian work, that's some of the most arduous and emotionally exhausting work that happens in society. No, fuck you. But you guys, and I mean, people are compensated for the emotional labor there, right? I guess we can say that like that form of compensation is maybe unethical or whatever, but I think that opens you up more broadly.
Unethical, it's immoral.
Yeah, but I mean, then more broadly, you're looking at a lot of different types of transactions that are probably unethical. Like when we talk about like CNAs working with people in old folks' homes, like that job is emotionally fucking exhausting, and those people aren't compensated that well for it. Or working with older patients with dementia, or working with a ton of things that can be emotionally exhaustive. I don't know if we would ever run down that argument and go like, yeah, I think all forms of emotional exhaustion aren't ethical to be compensated for.
I think people love to have these conversations about like surrogacy and abortion, and it's like they haven't, you know, reproduced themselves. I know Destiny is a father, but it's like you get to a point in life where you kind of realize
you're telling me I'm shit out of luck about reproducing.
What do you want me to like? Oh, hey God, hey, look, can you go back in time and hook up Genevieve? Like, you get the cards that you're dealt, like, and it sucks.
We don't get the cards.
Well, you're
reshuffle the deck all the time, right?
Okay, then reshuffle the deck. Go pay a poor woman and rent out her womb. Go, if you want to. Go do it. It's legal. It's unethical. It's immoral.
Why is
I
it?
don't condone
Well,
it.
we're trying to figure out why it's unethical or immoral, right? Like you can say, like,
No,
like God, my
you're
kidney,
paying a
my.
woman to use her body, and she's putting her life on the line. Usually for women who didn't plan properly, because infertility, that's a different discussion. We're just like talking about the luxury of it, the constant commodification of the female body. Like nobody's out here trying to like rent. Like it's just.
How many people that pursue gestational carriers do you think are doing it just out of pure convenience and not out of any kind of like medical or infertility element?
Even okay, I
that's
don't
probably a
have numbers on
pretty small group of
It-
people
it
at that
doesn't
point,
matter.
right? Like
It's
even
still
Kim
evil.
Kardashian had a medical reason to use surrogates.
It's still evil. Whether or not you're doing it for infertility or because of senescence, you are still renting out a younger, lower socioeconomic status woman's womb.
Is that
That's
lower
not always
socio?
true. What, like my example of using a sister or a friend or something, I would still pay them. Where's the evilness in that?
What if she's wealthier?
Unequal.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what if she's wealthier? Because you keep saying lower SES. Is that like integral to your argument?
I think that that's probably what's happening here.
Yeah, but let's say it was
like
just,
this
let's say it was
upper
only
middle
the
class liberals
wealthiest.
that are using the lower SES people.
I want to pay $1 million to have
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton deliver my fucking future child. Okay? Would that be unethical?
I mean, that's just like I don't know if you guys like to work with those examples, but I don't typically work with those kinds of examples.
The problem is that
Definitely
you're.
that's
It'd be
cool.
so weird that it'd be unethical.
Well, no. I think the issue is that you're saying something is fundamentally unethical or evil, but in your example, you're depriving multiple people of liberty. You're telling one woman she's not allowed to sell her services in that way, and you're telling another woman she's not allowed to purchase a service in that way. So you've got two consenting adults that want to engage in a transaction that should only be their business, and you want to interject and say, actually, that mutually consensual transaction, that's unethical. That's a pretty high bar that you're setting for whatever the unethicality is, so we need to have like some reason for why it's unethical. I think the ball is in your court to say, like, even though both these adults are consenting and they're of age, they're not minors, they're fully within their rights to do whatever they want, it's still unethical. The ball is in your court to say why.
It could, because it's like this constant cheapening of the sanctity of life. Okay, so we see this here because I think about the slippery slope. Okay, so like we can talk about like.
No, hold on, wait. If you just said you wouldn't deal with our examples earlier, you can't appeal to slippery slope now. You need to say why this is.
These are things that have happened. These are things that have happened. This is a slippery slope that has occurred. Okay.
Okay.
So like we've cheapened the sanctity of life to where we're like, like we could just rent out another woman's womb. I'm sure it's been done in human history. Don't get me wrong. But like I think that it's getting really, really strange right now when we have women who are like past their fertile window. They're just like, well, I can just, I can do this, I can do that. There's all these fail safes for women. That's one cheapening of human life. Another cheapening of human life. Also, we're not considering the child, the freaking kid that's in the womb that knows the mom.
The kid doesn't. The kid doesn't know the difference. What do you mean?
Yes, they do. My baby in my womb can hear.
Your baby
Like,
is
she
not even
knows my
forming
voice.
memories yet. She does. She's
No, it
like.
doesn't. That's fine.
No,
That's
but I'm
fine,
just saying that like
knows
kids
my
that are
voice.
there are a reason why kids can be adopted at early ages, and parents have to have the talk with like, listen, you're adopted. It's like, oh my god, I didn't know. Unless they have like fucking green eyes or some shit, right?
There's
Like,
still problems that come from that. Even if you adopt a 6-month-old, there's issues from that, okay? But aside from that, right, that's like age cheapening. Then then we have abortion, right? Where we can just terminate. If you spend enough time talking to multiple women that are pro-choice, it just comes down to like, well, when I feel like it is when I should be able to terminate. The consequence of abortion logic has trickled down to medical assistance in dying. We in the West just don't have an appreciation for the sanctity of life. And the conversation, like the surrogacy conversation plays into that. So we keep just trying to find ways to commodify and play God. Then we're gonna like sit here and whine about the consequences.
You have to,
of it
yeah.
after
It's
the
you
fact.
can't.
Humanity.
You're begging the question of some of these things that, like, you say, like, because you keep saying things that don't mean anything. Like, oh, like playing God. When we give type 1 diabetics insulin, that's
means
playing
nothing
God.
to you.
No. It means nothing to you either, right? Because if you go and have birth and you get an epidural, is that playing God? Or if you've got somebody that's getting insulin, is that playing God? Or we've got somebody on the panel that's had oncology treatments, has had chemotherapy or radiation, is that playing God? Like, we play God all the time in a ton of different ways, right? Your face doesn't
You're
look like
just
that.
drawing the line
Hold on.
about
Wait,
where
yeah,
it-
you're, like your face, you've got makeup on your face. My hair is not naturally blue. Like, we alter human experience and existence and medical outcomes and everything all the fucking time. There are a lot of babies that shouldn't live that do because of like neonatal treatments we have. Like, we play God in all sorts of different ways. The onus is on you to say why it's wrong. You can't just say like it's wrong because it's playing God, because we play God in all sorts of different ways.
I don't think that any of the examples you gave can be compared to a human life. That is, it's its own human life with its own unique DNA sequence. I don't think these are the same thing.
What-
And I
The
think that we
medical
can say
example
why-
absolutely is, because if I didn't have medical intervention and play God with my treatments, then that's my life that would be here.
there's no other human that was involved in that, right? Like we're breaking down.
But if we're talking
human
about the
life to
safety
convenience.
of life and we want to just let it be in God's hands, then we shouldn't ever intervene in these situations. According
Talking
to
about a
you.
human life with potential, you guys are talking about like unrelated medical interventions, and I'm explaining how like this logic has leaked out.
I'm
in other
also
ways of
talking about a
society.
human life.
Not like a like where's the baby?
Well, can I ask then, Allie? So you have your husband. He passes out. He doesn't have a DNR or anything. You don't know. Just flow with me this type of thing, please. You have to make a medical decision for him in aftercare. Like you are making decisions, medical decisions, to affect another human life. That might be deleterious. They might have bad consequences. Are you just not going to choose to save the person you love because maybe there's going to be some pain down the road? Like that's playing with another human life, is it not?
Yes, but I was
So what's the difference?
specifically talking about babies. Now, my
Oh, it's a
husband's
baby.
wife.
What age is it okay to play with human life?
I don't think we're being reasonable here. We're comparing somebody who's in an accident that was out of their control, right? We're comparing that to a new human life with potential. However, if my
Do they have
husband- if
control
I-
over that?
I am
Does the
answering his
new human-
question. I'm answering his question. So if the doctors tell me that my husband still has human potential, because they're going to tell me if there's like brain death or not, if they tell me that he still has human potential, then I'm going to make decisions to extend his life. But if they're looking at me and they're telling me that he's brain dead, he wouldn't want me to extend his life. Like that's the difference. It's about potential, and we're nailing down human life and its potential and its value down to convenience. And we can see that in other ways. Like why does the palliative care conversation even end up entering majority of the time when I talk about things like abortion or surrogacy? Like it's just cheapening human life. Like I don't know what to say about that. I mean, but Lifeway TV could chime in because I feel like maybe we share similar things here.
This is a topic that I kind of your opinion. I'm gonna let you go ahead and roll with it.
Wow, Wick.
I think that there are like things that are manipulative, or like you can think of things that involve like using people, or you can put it in other ways, like I think sex work is a great example. I'm not super sold on surrogacy. Sorry. It's like something else. As long as it's a child being born, I can't. As long as it's a child being home and it's taken care of, it's like as that children, son, daughter, bonding, and it seems like respect the life at that point, right? Yeah, as long as it's the kid, because the issue here is like a broken house, right? The kid coming up in a terrible house, regardless of surrogacy or natural birth or anything like this, this is a problem. But if you have a child born to surrogate another, and then basically give it to like the mother right away, and the mother takes care of the kid, breastfeeds the kid, no still bond on there for the rest of like 5, 6 months
boy. He's pretty feminine right now, Lactoid. Got him.
I don't even. Here's the thing, like, you get first 5 years of life, to permanently set this child up and give them a foundation. Whether you adopt children that are born, a couple months after, or like 6 months, or like several years down the road, they still have like trauma and attachment issues, and adoptive parents don't even find out until it's like sometimes several years down the road, if that. So like, there's still damage being done. My perspective is, why do we even need to do the surrogacy, and we don't need to inflict this pain on children? Like, that sounds like child abuse to me.
So, and this is where I'm totally open to being convinced. Like, I've seen a lot of empirical evidence on why single parent households are bad. I haven't really seen any evidence that surrogacy has these same issues.
I think that
I'm not trying to go hard at you. I'm just saying.
I think the issue is that if you're talking on a spiritual level, I think that the issue is that there is like a fundamental role that a woman has in bringing a child into this world, and it starts at the moment of conception, and it doesn't end at delivery. It goes all the way to the death of, unfortunately, the child, or ideally the mother, right? That there's this whole thing in parenting that's involved in creating and birthing and raising and having a child, and that when we try to put too many things in between that process, that we cheapen the overall integrity of the process by making it hyper convenient at different points. So like, in the same way that you might cheapen the process of raising a child by giving them an iPad all the time, you might cheapen the process of motherhood by offloading all of the labor onto somebody else that like economically would choose otherwise. I think it's like the argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's not like it's an option for your average woman. You know what I mean? Like, these are typically wealthy women that are doing this thing in the first place. It is cheap, right? I mean, here's the thing. When we can do some celebrity examples. Priyanka Chopra, she's older, married to Nick Jonas, I think. She wanted surrogacy not because she was infertile or anything like that. She made it very well known that she's fertile. Their schedules simply did not match up with her ovulation window. That's cheap. If you don't have, like, if you are not even willing to go through what it takes to, like, labor and have a child, and you have the ability to, it seems really weird that you'd rent somebody out for that. You know what I mean? Like, adoption, obviously a very valid thing, but also, like, we are still neglecting that there is a possibility that children in these circumstances are being abused.
I think at the end of the day, I think
mother.
we would just need like some kind of empirical evidence of that. Like, are children born to surrogacy having like these huge traumatic issues? Like, my guess is the outcomes for them are probably way better than the norm, because it's parents that are electing to have them via surrogacy who are wealthy and everything too. Like, these are probably the children of the best. It's kind of like how I think children tend to do better in gay households because you have to adopt, and it's the idea that you have to jump through so many hoops to go through the adoption process that just by default, like, those children are going to end up doing better, not because gay parents are better, but just because of the selection process involved.
In the same way, yeah, you have to want this child so badly that you're going through all of these other obstacles to bring them into the world. There's good chance that you're also going to be taking steps to make sure that they have all the resources they need to grow up in a happy and healthy way.
So
it's not the same.
Go ahead.
Like, I've actually,
I have a question.
Yeah, no, it's not the same. Like, I've actually been pregnant. Like, they go through things and they go through fears too, but there's certain things that they're not going to experience. And again, like, I still think adoption is valid. This is not to negate adoption. I'm specifically talking about surrogacy. They don't know what that is to bear that physical toll with that baby inside of them. That's a lot of psychological, emotional, well, that would be the same thing as psychological. It's a lot of emotional and physical expenditure and bonding that they're not having with that child. And how many women are we seeing? And it's not like it's the masses, but there have been enough women that are surrogates that come out on TikTok and talk about these awful experiences that mirror experiences when, like, the wealthy used to adopt, when things were, like, way crappier regulation-wise, where they kind of let them know, like, hey, you're staff. This is our baby. Like, one TikTok that I just recently saw with a surrogate, they wanted the mother to wait for labor. And she said, no, I can't wait for labor. I have to induce because the baby their life is going to be threatened. And the surrogate couple was upset with her. Or we see, there was another
These are
picture
examples.
that I saw.
All of us would be opposed to that, though, right? Obviously, every single person here would be opposed to a surrogate mother being forced to carry somebody in an unhealthy condition, right?
Right, but, like, we see these examples that I simply need not be. There's other examples where we see, like, two gay men. They're taking a picture in the labor bed with the newborn baby. Why are they in the labor bed in the first place? They didn't give birth in that bed. They had to, like, you know, like, there's a certain level of perversion that is here, and that's the cheapening of the sanctity of human life. There's larger consequences. I'm not thinking about it just like as an isolated incident. I'm thinking about, like, the future societal implications of it. And I think that's often what gets neglected, I want to say, by the left, is unintended consequences. So that we can modify here, what are we going to see in the future? Because surrogacy, at the way that it's being conducted now, is relatively new. So, like, I don't, it's going to take a while to have the data on it. But I would wager to bet that it's probably going to be a negative impact in humanity. I don't know if it's going to be overall, but we'll have to wait and see.
Can I ask? So you mentioned something earlier, and correct me if I misheard or I was wrong or whatever. But you seem to say that surrogacy cheapens womanhood or cheapens something like that, to that effect, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'd ask Lactoid as well to chime in, or the other two if you want. Like, what else has modern society done to cheapen, in your opinion, womanhood? Like, what other examples other than surrogacy can we think of? Like, we could go on surrogacy all night, I think, if we want, but I do want to kind of broaden the discussion a little bit. What do you think, Lactoid? I want to put you back on Team Alley, maybe, a little bit. What do you think?
Ways in which society has cheapened women?
Yes, cheapened womanhood, specifically. Femininity, womanhood, things like that. You mentioned pornography earlier?
Yeah, there's a different argument for that. I do think that perhaps, maybe not, I won't go down like the surrogacy route, but perhaps the sort of, to some extent, the sort of
I'm asking you.
cultural discouragement of motherhood as opposed to like career success. I think that does somewhat cheapen the unique experience of women. I think pornography is manipulative as well as sex work, but for other reasons. I actually think it's more manipulative against men. But yeah, like drug dealers, for example. But that's a whole different conversation we can have.
Fair enough. Okay. Would you agree with that, Madam Genevieve, that society is pushing careers on women, is cheapening your womanhood? Do you think, first of all, do you think that's happening? And second of all, do you think it's actually cheapening your, your femininity? What do you think?
I definitely don't think so. I think that, I guess, there's a lot of appeal in having a job and having a career and making your own income. So does that mean that it's being pushed on us? I don't know. It's pretty appealing to have your own bank account and to be able to buy stuff when you want to and know that you're not counting on someone else to keep a roof over your head. I think that's ultimately why most women have decided to pursue careers. I don't think it cheapens their womanhood at all. I think if anything, it gives them more security and resources to then explore like their true passions and things that they actually are interested in.
Me?
Anyone who wants to respond can.
Like, do jobs cheapen womanhood? No, jobs don't cheapen womanhood, right? Like, I think the thing is you were saying earlier that it feels good to have your own money or something like that. There's some women that are completely okay with depending on good men. That's like a perspective to have. And I think we often have this boogeyman when it comes to women, that if they get married and financially depend on a man, that they're going to be out there on their behinds. We've got tons of charities. That's one aspect. And the other thing too is if you were a stay-at-home wife and mom or mom, you stand to benefit way more in divorce court than if you were employed. But as for a job, a profession, making a woman masculine, that's not true. Like a Proverbs 31 woman, if you want to get biblical about it, she worked, she just kept the family as a priority. And men should be keeping the family as the priority as well. Like that's not healthy for anybody. Aside from that, I think American women just want to look for all kinds of different excuses about why they can't be, functional in a relationship. Like, I can't be feminine for you because I have this job. Like, that doesn't make any sense. There's lots of women that work and still treat their men like men.
I guess to elaborate a little more what I said, I'm not necessarily talking about like jobs in general. I had brought up in a discussion yesterday with somebody, I brought up all the stats that show that, especially after following birth, being home with the child and breastfeeding is recommended by the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics consistently for both the physical and emotional well-being of the child. And I brought up how that is a reason, right? That could be a reason why motherhood is something that should be done, I guess. And the very first response I got was, well, that's going to increase the wage gap, right? That's going to mean that women are taking breaks from their career and not making as much money. the fact that was the response, I think, is sort of what I'm pointing to where the value that is there is sort of kind of being put aside for some kind of greater feminist narrative, or like this sort of idea of, well, we have to like get the wage gap all the way 100%, and we're willing to sacrifice what's best for our children to do so. I think that does cheapen motherhood to some extent, personally.
Where we get off thinking that we need it all, we gotta have it all, the world has to give us it all. We've already been relieved of the miracle of the burden of childbirth. Okay, so we have like birth control, we have economic autonomy. It's like nonsense to me. How much more do women want, right? And the alternative perspective too that gets forgotten, because women just aren't having kids. Okay, 50.1% of women in the UK are childless by age 30. That's unprecedented. Childbearing ends at some point, right? You will have a second half of life, and you're probably going to want to work, unless you're just going to be shuffling your kids around, taking them to different like events, sporting events, what have you. A lot of women end up, working either from home or out there in the regular workplace after they raise children. But I think that we lack that perspective because we're just not really doing it a whole lot. And also, women who decide to take a break from the job market and have children, they are not often out here streaming. Like, there's a reason why there's not a whole lot of conservative moms online. It's because they have stuff to do. Same thing with conservative fathers as well.
Conservative moms are definitely online. They're just all on Facebook showing horrible memes with each other, to be fair.
Okay, well, I'm not trying to be mean. Like, maybe the decent ones. You know what I mean? Like, all the moms that I respect in real life and socialize with who raise their own kids, they're not online to this capacity or this
Do you not respect streamers? That's actually the most base thing you said. Fair enough.
Oh.
Lactoid, I got
Wi-Fi, that's all it is,
Lactoid, I'm curious what your thoughts are on guaranteed paid parental leave. You're obviously in support of parents being able to spend time with a newborn. Do you think that should be something that's guaranteed?
This is a situation in which I have kind of two principles that collide, where in a perfect world, yes, like I would want that, and I would want there to be cultural sort of structures and social structures that encourage people to do that and support people doing that. But that sort of conflicts with like other opinions I have as it comes to government spending, taxation. No, I would be opposed to those policies, but I agree that,
despite the fact that you stated earlier that you are in support of all of the studies and you agree with the fact that it's best for everyone involved.
Yeah, no, it is, right? And so the question is, I mean, if we want to get like really libertarian with it, like how much money can we steal to do this good thing? I would kind of step away from that. I don't want to make it a libertarian, like, taxes, theft, meme discussion. But I mean, that's the reason why, it's the only reason why I'd be opposed to it.
You want women to fulfill the role of womanhood, but you don't want to create a society that allows them to comfortably do that.
Well, no, I don't want to use coercion to make it so. I would rather it be that we have a culture thus that men wouldn't just leave, right? And I think this is like, when we're talking before, when it was brought up,
regardless of whether or not the man leaves, a lot of women don't have guaranteed paid leave after they give birth. Like, they're at risk of losing their job, whether or not the father is in the picture.
Sure, and so we should recognize, though, that like if that doesn't happen, that's a good thing. But there's always a trade-off. How much are we willing to do to force a good thing to happen? There's certain things I'm not willing to do if the offset is not sufficient enough, and I'm not sure it is.
I want to ask, there's another tweet, Allie. I'm sorry to pick on you a little bit.
No, it's okay.
There's another tweet you made about how sexual liberation has been a horrible failure. I don't have that tweet up right now, but
yeah,
that's the gist of it, right?
Oh yeah, I can't imagine, because if you're a forward thinker, right, not everybody's gonna have, not everybody just has that personality type. I've always been a forward projector, so like that's what I'm saying. I constantly talk about like the slippery slope of the things that happened. So I'm just trying to think, if you're a logical thinker who could project, and the sexual liberation movement comes on the scene, and you're like, women can sleep with whoever they want, whenever they want, there's no consequence of pregnancy, they're probably not going to vet the men as much as they would if they had more skin in the game. And it's possible that a small pool of men who lack morals might take advantage of this opportunity. Like, you might have been thinking in your head, this sounds like a horrible idea, right? So I think in my mind, it probably only sounded like a good idea to the ignorant, degenerates, and hopefuls. It's the only way that sounded like a good idea.
I don't even know if this idea of a small pool of men, this weird hypergamy thing, I don't know if that even exists, actually. I've taken that at face value from Red Bullets for a long time. I don't think there's ever been any data or study to support that ever. I think people draw really weird predictions off of like Tinder, where it's like 5-to-1 men to women, which is a bad environment to compare anyway. But my guess is going to be that the more degenerate society you're talking about, probably the easier it is for the average dude to get laid, because there's not as much consequence there for a woman having sex with a person.
Yeah, I think men want us to be sexually liberated as women, but you're talking about like the small pool of men. So I'm just talking like if I look at hypergamy, I don't look at it just based off of swiping on apps or anything like that. I think about, is it attractive? Yes or no question. If a man is in the top of his field for a competence hierarchy, because you can have a competence hierarchy in multiple fronts these days because we're past the Industrial Revolution. So I think just like if you set yourself apart as a man in a group of men, then yeah, women might have a proclivity to want to be more romantic with you or to select you. So that's like my understanding of hypergamy. I know that these guys pontificate a lot about dating stats, but that also only holds true to people that use dating apps in the first place. So yeah.
Sure, but I'm just saying if there was a huge tie-in to there being like a big consequence for sex for a woman, if you're, or I guess, wait, I don't even know what you disagree with then, because it sounded like you were saying for the average guy this might be a worse sexual environment, but I don't think that's the case. It's probably a better sexual environment if you're just looking to get laid.
I mean, I think there's hope for sexless men more so now. Like, I don't think men lose with sexual liberation is kind of my thing,
Okay.
right?
So why
Because
is it
a lot
horrible
of
then?
guys in my chat